I hope you're enjoying the program that we've put together in order to encourage you to read what my parents still call to this day the red books, because for a century they've been printed in red covers. But we want you to read a brand new paraphrase for the 21st century generation of Adventists.
You're going to love it. Here's the person that directed the whole project. She loves kids, and you'll love her. I actually got to know her as I was a member of a youth group up here in Seattle. Here's Cindy Tooch.
Traveling in many countries in recent months, I've found Adventist young people eager to know more about their church and eager to be involved. When I share stories of how God used Ellen White to help raise up our church in the middle of the 19th century, they often want to hear more. But the events happened so long ago, we're in danger of forgetting the stories, the challenges, the miracles that saw a handful of people, many of them young, become a movement of millions around the world. It excites me when I see young people respond to the words of a very wise, spiritual mother and grandmother when she talks to them about the issues that are on their minds right now. The issues Betsy and Curtis talked about at the beginning: relationships, wellness, social justice, careers, how to know and love God, what to do with doubt, and how to pray. To make a selection of her writings on these themes available to a wider audience of young people, we've prepared this new book. It's paraphrased in contemporary language from her original manuscripts. I'm eager for you to read it. You can get a copy in paperback at many Adventist book centers around the world. Now, as we conclude this program, I want you to hear 4 young people from different parts of the world that have been blessed by Ellen White's books and express their feelings in their own words. In these writings, they have experienced Jesus and have been led back to the Scriptures to forge a friendship, a genuine bond with Him. My prayer is that you too will respond to the call to stand apart. That's not always easy, but you can make an eternal difference for Jesus, first in your family, and then wherever in the world the Holy Spirit leads you. May God bless your spiritual journey. I look forward to meeting you soon when together we see Jesus face to face.
There have been many times in my life where I've been uncertain, concerned about things that were going to happen, not sure which way to turn. And then I read a passage in Patriarchs and Prophets that calmed me so much, and I have a quote that I'd like to share with you. There are many who become restless when they cannot know the definite outcome of affairs. They cannot endure uncertainty, and in their impatience, they refuse to wait to see the salvation of God. If they would but trust in God and watch unto prayer, they would find divine consolation. Their spirit would be calmed by communion with God.
Once you've read Ellen White's writings, you have a tendency to remember them whenever necessary. Like when you're falling asleep in church and you remember what she wrote about Gethsemane. Or maybe you're scared to share your faith and you remember the Walden Seas. Or maybe you're scared of your faith sometimes and you remember the steps and steps to Christ. And after you've read and reread those books, you have to pause and wonder, I wonder where she got that from. That's when I pick up my Bible and begin to study. And that's when I realize that I'm able to see things I haven't been able to understand before.
Growing up, I was never really exposed to the writings of Mrs. White. While I knew who she was and had vaguely heard about her from the pulpit, I had never read any of her books. Nor did I really feel compelled to do that, because what I'd heard about her caused me to assume that her writings were condemning and rigid. Several years ago, however, some friends of mine, when I was going through a spiritual crisis, exposed me to some of her writings. And I could handle the apparent contradiction, and I could deal with that mystery, and decided to take a new look, and that radically changed my perspective. So I read The Desire of Ages concurrently in my study of the Gospels, and what I saw was a real and human and emotional Jesus, and that changed my life forever.
Through the writings of Ellen White, I came to see the bigger picture of the battle that Christ and Satan are fighting over the world, over me. As I live in this context, my life has meaning. I matter to the God of this universe, And so do you. I invite you to read Ellen White for yourself. Try A Call to Stand Apart. You may be surprised to discover a whole new dimension to your experience with God.
So now we return to that important question Betsy asked at the beginning. What was Ellen White like as a person? Jim Nix is a historian. He has spent his lifetime researching Ellen White, talking to her grandchildren, other persons who actually knew her. He has also read accounts written by her contemporaries. I know of no one better prepared to answer that important question. What was Ellen White like as a person? Jim, please answer that question.
Cindy, I'm glad you asked, because growing up in the church, I must confess Ellen White really wasn't a real person. But having had the privilege of meeting 5 of her 7 grandchildren and talking with them, as well as a few other people that have known Ellen White, what emerges for me is an extremely warm individual. Let me just share a few anecdotes that they shared with me. For instance, when the grandchildren were very small, they didn't realize how important their grandmother was. And so, of course, living nearby, they would like to go over to see their grandmother whenever possible. She would be sitting in her room there at Elms Haven in Northern California with her lapboard where she was doing her writing, and they knew they weren't to interrupt her, but she loved to see her grandchildren, and she wanted to be with them as much as they wanted to be with her. And so they had a little signal worked out between them. As soon as she would lay down her pen, because she'd come to the end of her thought that she was writing right then, they knew that was the sign. They could run over, jump up on her lap, and she'd give them a big squeeze and a hug and tell them a little bit about what was happening there on the farm, maybe new chicks that had hatched or a calf that had been born, sometimes even fresh apples that might be growing on one of her trees that were now ready to be picked. But after a little visit, they'd scamper off and be on their way. One of the favorite memories of the grandchildren were the buggy rides. You see, as their grandmother got older, she still liked fresh air, but she couldn't get out and exercise as much as she had done when she was younger. And so she, every day, when the weather was nice, she would try to go for a buggy ride. And these were, as I say, special times. And the grandchildren were often invited to go along. And as the little horse and buggy, the horse was clip-clopping down the lane, why, they would be singing hymns. And Ellen White would remark as they would pass the house, I wonder if the people in that house know anything about Jesus. And then, if they saw them out in their yard, maybe they were out working in their garden or something, Ellen White would stop. And she'd talk with them over the fence about Jesus. She might give them a tract or some produce from her garden or fruit from one of her trees, but always talking about Jesus. And for years after she died in 1915 in Elms Haven, she was remembered as the little lady dressed in black who came around and talked about Jesus.
You know, Ellen White had a dream to introduce to as many people as possible Jesus, so they'd experience his presence now and forever.
Many in our generation want to rediscover that dream and make it a reality. Let's meet Jesus together. You know, as the sun goes down this evening, it reminds me of the lateness of Earth's history. There's a lot of work to do, many people to encourage to walk with Jesus in time's last hour. This is our church. It's our chance. It's our day, and it's our dream. Let's live the dream.